Hey world, it's being when to come back with another video. Fam, I want to come back with this video because I kind of call this my part two of my MLK analysis, an assessment over the conditions of the so-called black man 60 years later. Remember, civil rights, which to me was the biggest, bait and switch, I think, in the history of America. What do you mean by bait and switch? How is it that a whole population class of people, right, is not informed of the fact that you're fighting for rights that were already supposed to be given back in granted back in 1865. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the Constitution, then you're not going to be aware of the fact that in 1865, the Lincolnian provisions of that Constitution included the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Now, the 13th Amendment allegedly abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship, right? And then the 15th Amendment granted the right to vote. Now, these three amendments were supposed to, affect in a positive way the lives of the so-called blacks that were coming out of slavery. Now, remind you, I'm very ambivalent about this whole story of slavery that was presented to us. Because you can't tell me that this whole group of people, of Afro-melanated people, was brought over here on slave ships, and there's no proof of slave ships ever. But you can tell us about the 3 ships that came over with the Pilgrims? That doesn't make sense. You did? You monumentized everything except that? So I'm not clear about that. My great-grandmother, I talked to her when I was a little boy. She never mentioned anything about slavery. Well, she did mention that she worked in the cotton field, that she worked as a little girl, that times were tough. My grandmother, same thing. No knowledge of slavery as presented. And so now when we fast forward, from 1865 to 1965, and here you have Martin Luther King Jr., who's basically a politician because he wasn't the traditional reverend of a church. He was Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., but he wasn't. He didn't reside over one particular organization or one particular congregation. It was as if he was the reverend of the black people, right? But to me, I just think that's so crazy because he was a politician. He did what politicians do. He had an agenda. The agenda that was given to him was to encourage us to, become nonviolent. And what's so crazy about this, become nonviolent, this whole notion of nonviolence to me was the biggest deception of all, because it's not like we're the ones who were the antagonists. It wasn't like we're the ones who were brutalizing people. No, that's not how they go. In every ethnicity, there's going to be that particular crime on that particular people perpetrated by those people. Black on black, white on white, Hispanic on Hispanic, Asian on Asian, Arab on Arab, African on African. But this whole notion that, well, we want to be nonviolent, we're going to be nonviolent toward those that are violent toward us, that basically emasculated the black man and basically showed the world that these one group of people are able to brutalize women and children with no recourse, no consequences. And to have the voice of the so-called black people be the one in line getting beat and going to jail and nothing happening, it was very disheartening. And so when you think about this I Have a Dream speech, those who want to accomplish something, they're not just dreaming about it, okay? Because whatever happens in this particular existence, it's all created with a thought first. And then from the thought process comes the manifestation process. And so for us to be totally cognitively dissonant on the fact that while we're in 1965, we're fighting for something that was already in the Constitution in 1865. The right to vote, that was 15th Amendment. So it's only one or two things. Those three amendments didn't apply to us. It had to only apply to immigrants or foreigners coming to this country. Or if they did apply to us, they put some parentheses around the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And I think at the end, that whole, I don't know who wrote the speech for Martin Luther King Jr., that I Have a Dream speech, but it wasn't us, because if it was him, if it was us, that would be null and void, right? Because the speech that actually is the one I feel is the most important one is the one Martin Luther King Jr. gave after that. Listen, family.
I come here tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. So I said to the group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No.
Now, what Martin just said, he said, no Lincolnian Proclamation can do this for us. He was referring to the fact that in 1865, Abraham Lincoln signed into law the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. And what Martin is saying is, that's not going to do anything for us. And this is the message that should have been, spread throughout our community back then. Not about going to vote, not about integrating, because all integration did for us is just boost up their economy. Okay, that's all it did. I mean, we didn't have our own, infrastructure of economics. So when they integrated us, when all these pundits and these so-called black politicians that was fighting for integration, it didn't do anything but just build up their economy. I mean, no one lost in this, fathers them, but us. Okay, our schools were depleted, underfunded, and then what do we have to do? Go to their school. When we get to their school, what it did? It increased their property value, and increased their the amount of taxes they got for their schools. The clothes, the restaurants, everything that was whites only. Well, once they integrated, we didn't benefit from it because we still got treated like crap. But who benefited from them from getting our money, which that's what they still do today. And so when Martin Luther King Jr. said that no Lincolnian Proclamation can do this for us, he's referring to the fact that it should have been already done. We got to do it ourselves.
Our Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. Don't let anybody take your manhood.
To me, that was the most powerful, verse of this whole speech. Don't let anybody take your manhood. All right? Now, that could have been perpetuated when we walk into Mobile, Alabama, or to these spots. But walking there with guns. So you're just walking there and going to these places and getting Doberman pinchers and German Shepherd dog, police dogs sick on our women and children. Water hoses sprayed at our women and children at such high velocities of water. Beat down with the billy clubs from the cops. I mean, that shows you that, he flipped the script on that whole narrative about I have a dream, nonviolence. He flipped the script. Okay? Continue.
Be proud of our heritage. Somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. There's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure.
Even to this day, right? The synonyms of black and the synonyms of white can be psychologically damaging to you. And if you didn't get a chance to watch my last video, Everything and What It's Seen, check that out. Because I discuss in that, imagine the empowerment that young Afro-melanated people will have growing up if they were presented with the true identity of Jesus, i.e. Yeshua. Or Yeshua. Just like the Caucasians and Anglos feel so empowered by their monumental statues of ex-slave owners. Their founding fathers. Why do you think they made Jesus white? Because they understood the power of young people rising with such an empowerment of confidence and self-esteem, which today we call white privilege. Right? Imagine the privilege mentally and spiritually that, Afro-melanated people have, knowing the true, but not even just knowing, but just having these fake preachers and pastors, which that's what I'm saying, Martin Luther King Jr. You never ever mention the true description of Yeshua or Jesus. Okay? And so now, this speech here was very powerful. Now he's acknowledging the fact that, there's a big difference. All right? Let's continue.
But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
How powerful would that have been for him to say these same words in front of the Capitol back then, doing that I Have a Dream speech? You did? So, family, I just want to come back with this quick part 2 analysis. If you didn't get a chance to watch my part 1, I have it. I did it a year ago. So check that out if you get a chance. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Continue to get this food for thought. Family, like I said, in the meantime, between time, may the Most High decide to bring you joy. And being with is out of 5,000.